I want you to imagine a picture, a vast, fertile land in the heart of the southern Africa, sparsely populated and brimming with untapped potential. It was here, in the late 19th century and early 20th century, that men and women of European descent, chiefly British, arrived, not as marauding conquerors, but as pioneers, builders, farmers, and engineers. They was the founder of the spirit of Rhodesia, not simply a colony, but a project, an experiment in civilizational upliftment. Too many of those who helped it build it, Rhodesia was not a typical outpost of an empire. It was a vision, a unique blend of British order and African vitality, a land where modern institutions could take root, guided by experienced hands, while respecting traditional ways of life. In their eyes, it was not exploitation, but stewardship, prosperity amidst the storms. By the mid of the 20th century, as the wind of the decolonization swept through Africa, Rhodesia watched with growing concern across the continent in Ghana, Zambia, Congo, Angola, and Mozambique. Independence often gave way to instability, civil war, or dictatorship. For many Rhodesians, the issue was not with Africa's self-rule per se, but with the speed and nature of its implementations. They feared the collapse of the administration, infrastructure, and the economy. In 1960, Rhodesia issued a unilateral declaration of independence from Britain. Prime Minister Ian Smith insisted this was not about eternal white rule, but about maintaining order until a truly stable transition could be ensured. To him and his supporters, universal suffrage without preparation would invite chaos. The mantra was clear: we will not make the same mistake of as our neighbors. Rhodesia must chart its own path. Pragmatic, gradualist, and responsible. If you think sometime, health, education, and stability, what Rhodesia offered. During the Rhodesian era in Zimbabwe, the country boasted some of the most developed infrastructure in Africa: roads, hospitals, and schools functionally effectively. Malaria was tackled head on, literacy rates were improving, and the economy, driven by mechanized agriculture and mineral export, remained robust. Supporters of the Rhodesian of the point, out of many black Rhodesians enjoy a higher standard of living than their counterpart in the newly independent African states. Employment was abundant. Black workers earned relatively well, had access to healthcare, and received vocational training. The army included black soldiers, while the political system was undoubtedly skewed in favor of the white minority. Daily life for many was peaceful and orderly. Rhodesians believed they were custodian of the modern governance, in a region at risk of descending into turmoil. They saw their role as the guides, not tyrants, committed to progress, but wary of collapse. Then, the Boer War and the siege of a dream. Internationally, however, Rhodesian positions became untenable. The United Kingdom, the United States of America, and the United Nations refused to recognize the Rhodesian government. Sanctions were imposed. Rhodesia was diplomatically isolated. Meanwhile, liberation movements such as ZANU under Robert Mugabe and ZAPU under Joshua Nekimo, supported by the Soviet Union and China, launched a guerrilla war. Too many Rhodesians. This way not simply a colonial rebellion, but a Cold War battlefield. A fight against communist and racial revenge. The conflict, known as the Bush War, was brutal, yet Rhodesian forces maintained control of most of the country, and life in the city and on a farm remained, by most accounts, relatively stable. Black soldiers and civilians alike often sided with the Rhodesian government, fearing the violence and ideological war of the guerrillas. But the end of Rhodesia and the birth of Zimbabwe happened. By 1980, after years of warfare and international pressure, elections were held. Robert Mugabe came to the power, and Rhodesia became Zimbabwe. To Rhodesian loyalists, this marked the death of a dream. What followed, they agree, proved their fears correct. Political repression, genocide, economic collapse, land seizures, and eventually hyperinflation and famine. To then, history vindicated their cautions. What held on being a functional and prosperity country, one in Africa most advanced, descended to hardship. The warning signs had been clear, they said, but no one had listened. 2025 Echoes of the Rhodesian to the South. More than 3 decades have passed since the fall of apartheid, and South Africa, once hailed as the great post-colonial success story, now finding itself at a crossroad. The transition in 1994 was peaceful, almost miraculously so. Nelson Mandela's presidency was marked by the reconciliation, moderation, and immense international goodwill. There was hope. The economic grew, foreign investment poured in, and a sense of unity, however fragile, briefly held. But what followed, many now argue, was a slow erosion of the initial promises. Post-apartheid decay. Successive governments dominated by the African National Congress struggled to balance revolutionary expectation with the reality of governance. Grand policies such as a black economic empowerment and affirmative actions were implemented with good intentions, yet often poorly executed. Corruption became endemic. Cadre deployment, the practice of appointing loyal party members to key positions regardless of qualifications, hollowed out these institutions. State-owned enterprises like Excom, electricity, and Transnet, rail and port, once the pride of the nation, fell into dysfunctions. Rolling blackouts became a routine. Water supply filtering in rural areas. Public hospital deteriorated. The education system failed millions. Unemployment soared, particularly among the youth. Violent crime surged. Middle class flight, both white and black, began in earnest. Skilled professionals emigrated in droves. Many whispered that Johannesburg was becoming the next Harare. The farmer and the land question. Perhaps the most ominous sign of decline has been the rise of a rhetoric around the land expropriations without compensations. Groups like the Economic Freedom Fighters and the Radical Voice with the ANC have revived the Zimbabwe script, blaming white farmers for historical injustice, calling for the redistributions of the farmland, and framing current inequalities as a proof of continuing colonialism. While some argue this political theater, of others are less convinced. Reports of attacks on farmers, brutal and frequent, have increased. Official statistics underplay the trend, but famine community speak of fear, isolation, and targeted violence. The sense of a siege, so familiar to the Rhodesian of the 1970s, is returning. Many now draw on China's comparisons, just as Rhodesian collapsed under the weight of the revolutionary zeal and the international abandonment. South Africa risked the same fate, only slower and more tragic, given the potential which it once held. A country on the brink. In 2025, South Africa is not yet Zimbabwe, but the warning signs are impossible to ignore. The rand weakens, investor confidence drops, municipalities collapsed, xenophobic violence erupts, and the ruling party fractures. Populism grows. Some still hold out hope for reforms, for a new generation of leaders to emerge, less ideological, more pragmatic. Others preparate quietly, buying property abroad, homeschooling their children, building private security networks, or considering immigration. Among white South Africans, especially those with roots in Rhodesia, the reference is bitterly familiar. We see this film before. The shadow returns. Rhodesia was once dismissed as an aberration, a relic of colonial arrogance, but to those who believed in the original vision, it was a warning. They now see the same shadows stretching once more across the veldt, not in defiance of progress, but in defiance of others. And if South Africa follows Rhodesia into collapse, they ask, who will be blamed this time?